everybody needs a Bible around them, like in the general vicinity, like every other person, every third person. So if you don't have a Bible near you, Ethan, wave the Bible. Ethan, just go ahead. Ethan, just, yeah. Where Ethan got a Bible, you can stand up and go get a Bible. Everyone needs a Bible in the vicinity, and then every chair should have two half sheets of paper. They're different. It's not. I didn't get like OCD and make sure you have one. They're both different. So you will need both. Here in a minute, we're going to kind of divide and let you tackle some things together. So welcome back. We're in the midst of, I guess you could call it a series. I like to call it an exploration, just called Dig. And the premise is you have the ability, say you have in fact, if you have a cell phone, pull it out. You have the ability to go to fieldstreetstudents.com, and there is a place where you can submit a question, any question. It could be a question that you have. It could be a question that your best friend at school who's an atheist asked you. It could be a question, it could be any question. We're just looking for questions about faith, about Jesus, about why you should believe, why you should not believe, why is this so crazy, why is this so crazy. Any question that's on your mind, you can go to fieldstreetstudents.com, submit that anonymously. So, like, unless you sign your name at the end, I'm not going to know it's you. So, if you want me to know it's you, you can. I'm not going to judge you. I don't judge people like that. But you can do it anonymously, so you can ask whatever question you want. I can't promise it'll be answered. Like somebody asked me why I like the Aggies so much. I'm not going to answer that. And actually, I could, but you would be bored in 5 minutes. Nope, I don't got time. I have thought about that because someone asked me. I was like, man, they would get some super spiritual answer that they weren't really looking for. So we'll talk later about it. But you can submit a question. What we're doing, we're taking those questions, and we are just digging. We are asking questions together, digging into these topics, trying to figure out, or at least explore some beginning of an answer to that question together. I thoroughly believe that if we seek out questions, ask God questions, seek out answers, that He will give us answers to questions. In some sort or fashion. That he's not a God of confusion, but He's a God who wants you to know and be secure in your faith. And so tonight, the question that we are digging into is, why would God allow bad things to happen? So growing up, my family primarily spent our holidays with my mom's side of the family. It was just like the cool side, I guess. I don't exactly know a rhyme or reason. Maybe because we were a little bit closer. I don't know. But on that side of the family, my brother and I, so I have a brother. He is, I'm 27, so he's 25 years old. He lives in College Station, works at Texas A&M University, and he and I are the youngest two grandchildren on that side. So of all of our cousins, we are the youngest two. There are 8 in all, 8 cousins, and 6 of the 8 cousins are boys or men now. So it's just a bunch of testosterone, right? So as you can expect then, when you get all that testosterone in my grandmother's living room, like cramped in, she didn't live in a big house. You come into cramped living room growing up, there was a lot of wrestling that went on, and just like fighting and scrounging and like boys being boys. Does that make sense? Particularly among my older cousins. So my brother and I were actually the calm ones. They called us city boys because they were all like working on the ranch. I mean, they were all so much stronger than we. Okay, they're older, first of all. But also, so like they're developing faster, obviously, because they're older. It was like the difference between a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old. It's just not. I mean, like Sean and Justin. I know you're not 12, but if y'all were to wrestle, I think I would put my money on Sean every time, right? Oh boy. So we were the calm ones. We didn't wrestle, but even into my teenage years, and as a young man, I would get it into my head, and I think a lot of the guys in here will sympathize with me here, where you begin to look up and you realize you're getting closer and closer to your dad's height, right? You're like, oh, yeah, it is on today, right? you start to realize as a guy, it's like, okay, I'm almost my dad's height, which therefore in my pea-sized teenage brain meant I'm almost as tall as my dad, so I can totally get him. And what always happens? I mean, has anyone tried to like wrestle your dad? Okay, what typically happens? They cheat, okay. You whoop your dad or your dad whoops you? Okay, so 90% of the time, there's like this supernatural, I call it dad strength. It's just like, it's like the will to not lose. Like you're not going to let your son like show you up. So like I would get on the floor as like a 15-year-old and like try to wrestle dad down. It's like it's not going to happen because dad, although he's old and he's running out of steam, it's like he channels this supernatural dad strength out of nowhere. I don't know where it comes from. I don't perceive it, but then you like it happened, or you like go to arm wrestle him. You're like, Dad, when did you start lifting weights? I'm a football player, and I can't. You know, it's like there's this supernatural dad strength. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe I'm just not very strong. Man, I am. That's why I'm working out now. So when I have kids, I can always whip them into submission, right? Watch, I'm gonna be the one who's. So all of my cousins are like 6'3". Where did that height come from me? My brother's like 5'11", 6 foot. I'm not. I'm going to be the one whose kids are all like 6'2". Huh? No, 5'9". I am exactly 5'9". Including the hair, I'm a little bit taller, but 5'9". Anyway, we got way off track. What I'm getting at, there's this shared feeling, I think, of the guys in this room, like this innate ability and desire to be physical, right? That's why Buck is so popular. Think about it. Why is Buck popular? Because we're dumb and it's physical and we just want to beat each other up, right? So, the question that we're exploring tonight is one that truly is one that all of us have wrestled with, whether we want to admit it or not. And that question again is, why would a good God allow bad things to happen? And so this week leading up to tonight has been pretty tough for me. First of all, Jody had strep throat all weekend, which strep throat is terrible, guys. Like I got so scared of it by Friday that I was washing my hands and cleaning the entire house to make sure nothing got, like, okay, we can't have anything get germs, anything, because I don't want this to stay. Like, she was just like a lame duck for like 4 days in a row. Out, couldn't get up, didn't want to talk. I was like, oh man, this is terrible. So she had strep throat, just physically exhausted. You don't know that, you know that Joshua has been in the hospital, but Joshua is like one of a dozen different people from our church who are either currently hospitalized as we speak or have been hospitalized in like the past 3 days. I mean, there's some weeks where like we get emails that tell us when people were in the hospital. There's some weeks where it's like every 10 minutes it feels like something's coming in. That was Monday. Like every 10 minutes I looked up and someone else was in the hospital, or someone else was being eaten alive by cancer, or someone else was having trouble breathing. Young and old and everywhere in between. There's just a lot of hardship going on with this congregation right now for one reason or another. I have a close friend from Travis Avenue, where I came to serve here from Travis Avenue. He was a spiritual giant, and he worked in he worked in student ministry for 60-plus years as a volunteer worker. He was a Sunday school teacher in student ministry at Travis Avenue Baptist Church for 60-plus years. So for longer than your parents have been alive, he's been working and teaching senior high boys. And so this morning I was on Facebook, and I realized one of the old teachers. So I taught senior high boys at Travis Avenue with him and with another teacher. The other teacher had posted. He said, "Hey, there's no way for me to tell everybody, because this man has literally impacted 60 years worth of men and young men. But I want you to know that Bob Estel has passed away." And so I read that, and I was like, "Dadgummit, man!" I knew he was sick. He was battling leukemia and Parkinson's at the same time. Basically had a death sentence waiting on him. But just the reality of death and the reality of suffering, and thinking, man, this was a man who was strong, right? Like, he had the dad strength. I remember he arm wrestled me once with Parkinson's and beat me. Maybe it says more about me than it does about him. But, I mean, he was just so strong. and yet his body gave up on him, right? So long and short, regardless of your beliefs tonight, we all live in a world in which great pain and great suffering exist. And perhaps a better way to frame the question, not just why would God allow bad things to happen, maybe an even deeper way to ask it is why, if God is good, why is there pain and why is there suffering in the world? If God really is good, why is there pain and why is there suffering? And the problem we run into with this topic is that it simply is not going to go away. Because this topic of pain and suffering and why it exists goes beyond just your mind, right? It's not just an intellectual conversation. We don't just sit in here and talk about like these smart-sounding things and say, oh, pain and suffering and the implications. Like, it goes beyond that because it's a deeply personal matter of which each of us in this room is either dealing with right now or you will deal with at some point in your life. I know that not everyone in this room, I'm going to guess not everyone in this room has lost a close family member yet, but the day is going to come because death is going to come for everyone. And in different degrees of intensity at multiple points in your life, you're going to experience or express or have some level of pain, some level of disappointment, some level of suffering happen around you. One novelist referred to the problem of pain as the question mark turned like a fish hook in the human heart. And research has shown that this question, the problem of pain, why do pain and suffering exist, is actually the biggest obstacle for people who are seeking spirituality. So there's a guy named George Barna. Say George Barna. George Barna. He's this real smart dude who does opinion polls. He conducted a national survey for this guy named Lee Strobel. Everybody say Lee Strobel. Lee Strobel. Yeah, it's Strudel. So George Barna did this poll for Lee Strobel where he scientifically selected a cross-section of adults. He scientifically asked a cross-section of adults this question. If you could ask God one question and you knew that he would give you the answer, what would you ask? Guess what the top response was? By 17% of the people who were asked, so more than any other question, why is there pain and suffering in the world? And so we open up the conversation tonight. And as we do so, my goal is, again, my goal is to put a few tools in your hand so that you can continue to explore God on your personal. So this is not a question that we're going to my guess is you're not going to walk away completely satisfied with the answers that we can find tonight. But I think we can start you on this runway that if you're really curious and really wrestling with this, that you can run with it. And you can talk to one another. You can talk to your parents, and you can go from there. I humbly admit to you that I do not have a full understanding of pain and suffering. I don't completely understand their purposes in this world. However, I do boldly proclaim that I trust the Lord and I trust his word. And I believe that Jesus reigns on his throne. And so even with all the junk in the world, Jesus is still king and he's still alive today. And so as I said a few weeks ago, my goal here is not to tell you what to believe. Rather, I want to provide some evidence. Let you use your brain that God gave you to weigh through it and think about it with you and your peers. I want you to make decisions after you've thought through things intelligently, because I think you can do that. My hope, that's my goal, is not to just force feed things. My hope, though, is that through these sessions, as we're digging, that you will come out of it with a deeper faith. Perhaps even a new faith in Jesus Christ. So, with this in mind, I want to pray, and then we're going to jump into some groups, and I'm going to set you free, all right? God, I thank you for tonight. Lord, the problem of pain is one that's really confusing at times, God, particularly when we're in the midst of it. God, I pray that you would strengthen our faith now so that when we're in the midst that we may just sing of your glories and sing of your mercy, because we know that pain and suffering is going to come in one way, shape, form, or the other. For some of us, much worse than other people. God, I just pray that when it does come, that that these questions that we ask tonight and the answers that we find over the next few weeks, God, that they would just ring true in our mind, that you'd remind us of that you show us more of you. Lord, I do pray for anyone in the room that's just feeling this immense pain and suffering and despair today, tonight, in their lives right now. God, I pray that you would supernaturally intervene in ways that only you can do, in ways that we can't explain. I pray that you would intervene in this time. We love you. These things I pray in your name. Amen. All right, so grab 2 or 3 people around you, and let's form some groups. Ready, set, go. 2 or 3 people around you, form some groups. You're going to get to explore together. Hey, Zeke, could you do me a favor, Zeke? Hey, Zeke. Ezekiel Shelton, could you do me a favor? Will you unmute the computer? And I'm going to control it from up here. Do what? Oh, yeah. They said, give me your stand back. What? I'll go for it. All right, here's your assignment. Are you ready for the next few minutes? And don't be scared by assignment. So on that piece of paper, there's actually 2. One of them I actually gave you the references. Congratulations. That one is sovereignty, okay? Sovereignty, which is a big word for God is in control, all right? The other 2 just have scripture references. One is every reference of importance to the word pain in the Bible. And the other one is every scripture reference to the word suffering in the Bible. So in your group, would you just kind of take some time to quickly go through? Really what I would do is start with, there's key verses for each. Start with that on both of them and kind of work your way through and see what the Bible has to say about pain and suffering. And then we're going to bring it back, and I want to hear your thoughts, hear what you're thinking, and hear what you think about this subject. And we're going to carry on from there. So, ready, set, go. So, pain and suffering and sovereignty. Those are your word searches tonight. All right, let's bring it back in. All right, tell me what you learned. Let's process out loud. Some ground rules. Most every question is fair game. Obviously, like questions like, "Hey Daniel, why is your mustache so long?" Don't ask me that. But other than that, like questions that are on topic, everything is fair game, or even a little bit off the rabbit's trail. If I think it's too far off the rabbit's trail, I'll respectfully say, let's get back on. But that's the ground rule. So if you have any thought or any question, don't be afraid to bring it up. So what did you learn? Where did y'all start? Y'all start with sovereignty or pain or suffering or pain. All right. Pain. All right. So what do we learn about pain? Austin, what's up? Isn't that cool? Like, seriously, if you believe, especially if you believe the Bible's true, so you read that and say, pain and suffering will be gone. So imagine that. Like my friend who was suffering from leukemia and Parkinson's, simultaneously eating his body alive. Right now, in this moment, is probably fishing somewhere in heaven with no pain. I mean, seriously, like, how cool is that? No pain. What's that? Fishing. No, fishing. I don't know where I was going or where it sounded like I was saying. No pain. So, what else about pain? What else did you learn? It hurts. Okay. Evil men bring pain upon themselves. That's interesting. Let's flesh that out. What's that mean? Where was that? In Job. Did anybody else read that Job passage? Something about evil men bring pain upon themselves. One of the what? Okay. Anyone else read that one? Nope. What's that mean? Hey, okay, context is everything, right? I wonder, okay, I confess I have not read that Job passage today. But that in Job, there's some instances where the friends are telling him things that are not true. I'd be interested to see, like I say not true, just kind of like hogwash, bad advice. Is that Job talking or is that his friends talking? Little homework. Y'all can figure that out. That's interesting though. One of his friends. So in the context of that, it's probably not okay. So it's weird. So y'all know the story of Job? Job was a righteous man, right? And then the devil comes up to God and says what? Yeah, hey God, can I have this dude to like jack him up, right? Sorry. The devil came from wandering the land, and God was like, hey, have you thought about Job? Have you thought about messing with him? He's righteous. And like he literally gives Job over. So what does the devil do? Takes everything away from Job. Takes his wife, takes his family, takes his farmland, takes his money, takes his animals, everything. And then what you see people coming to Job and trying to like diagnose the problem, right? So many times we come to somebody who's suffering or is in pain, and we're like, hey, I know. The problem is that you are not trusting God enough. And so therefore you like we try to like prescribe this. So he's got these friends who are coming up and trying to tell him, hey, this is why all this bad stuff is happening. And literally what it is just God decided to be silent because God gave him up to be thrown into the fire, right? And at the end of end of the book, if you go, I think it's 40, it's towards the end, you see Job just kind of like cry out, like, what in the world is going on, God? And then God unleashes on him and is like, I am God. I created everything you see. I am all powerful. Do not question me. I am here with you. I love you, right? He just like explodes on him and shows his love and his mercy, but also shows his power in who he is. So Job, if you're looking for a biblical example of someone who suffered immensely, go home and start reading Job. It's actually spelled Job, J-O-B. Get a jab. Job. It's near the middle of your Bible. Again, it's about 40 to 50 chapters, but it'll make you feel better about your life a little bit. So, pain. What else you learn about pain? All right, suffering. Anybody get to suffering? Yes? Yes, ma'am. Okay. 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 Yes, ma'am. Grace. Okay, from Ezekiel. It's not a God problem, it's a man problem. Suffering. Okay. Yeah. Yes. So, there's this book that I started reading. Actually, PJ, Pastor John, recommended it to me on Monday in our our education meeting called The Case for Faith. I was talking with him how we're doing this on Wednesday nights. He said, hey, have you read this book, Case for Faith? And I was like, no. And then he looked at his bookshelf, like it's somewhere in there. And he talked about it. And essentially, the first question in the book, like I was already looking into this question, thinking about it. First question, since evil and suffering exists, a loving God cannot. So I read that chapter, and a lot of my source material came out of this book this week just because of how poignant it was and how appropriate it was. And in this chapter, kind of going along the lines of it's not a God problem, it's our problem. Just backstory. Lee Strobel was an atheist who worked for the Chicago Tribune, and he set out on a journey to prove Christianity wrong. And at the end of that journey, he was like, okay, I am wrong. And he submitted to the Lord Jesus Christ, gave his life over. That's a quick backstory. And so then he writes books like journalists. And so what he did in this book is he went to, I think, 8 of the smartest Christian thinkers in the world, like just brilliant men, and asked them these questions. And so he started with an atheist who just bashed God and gave really intelligent reasons for that. And then he took those intelligent reasons and asked these guys and said, hey, how would you respond to this? And that was one of them. And the first guy, he asked about this question using an analogy of a bear trap, and a human. You ready for this? I'm going to kind of read this but ask you. We're going to interact. Are you ready? So forgive me if I read this in the third person or second person. You understand? I'm going to try to do two things at once. So look at it this way. Would you agree that the difference between us and God is greater than, say, the difference between us and a bear? Okay? Okay. So imagine a bear in a trap and a hunter who, out of sympathy, wants to liberate him. You got that picture? So a bear is walking in the forest, and he gets his foot caught in a trap, a bear trap. So the hunter tries to win the bear's confidence, but he can't do it. So he has to shoot the bear full of drugs, right? So the bear is trying to kill him. He's trying to save him. So what does he do? He puts bear tranquilizer into him. The bear, however, thinks this is an attack and that the hunter is trying to kill him. He doesn't realize that he's actually being put to sleep and being put on tranquilizer out of compassion. So in order to get the bear out of the trap, the hunter has to push him further into the trap to release the spring. If y'all you know what I'm talking about? So they've got the trap, and they have to actually push it down in order to release a spring that then releases the trap. So in order to get the bear out, the hunter has to push his leg further in to get it out. If the bear were semi-conscious at this point, he would be even more convinced that the hunter was his enemy who was out to cause him suffering and pain. That's smart, right? I mean, if you're awake and someone's doing that to you, that's what your first thought is. But the bear would be wrong. And he reaches this incorrect conclusion because he's not a human being. Now, how can anyone be certain that's not an analogy between God and us? Does God do the same thing sometimes? We can't comprehend why he does it any more than a bear could understand the motivations of that hunter. As the bear could have trusted the hunter, we can trust God. Like the bear could have trusted the hunter, right? But intellectually, because he was not a human, he wasn't able to. What an analogy. Have you thought about that before? Like what if pain and suffering have this grand cosmic purpose? So you've got an infinite God who knows everything, is all powerful. He's everywhere, right? He knows the beginning of time. He knows when the end of time is going to come. What if he knows that your pain and your suffering is actually for your good at the end of time, but you have to endure it now to get to that good? Right? Crazy. Pain and suffering. What are some of your frustrations with pain and suffering? Is anyone bold enough to dive in there, to share? I can tell the analogy sunk in. It's a good analogy, isn't it? You can't control pain and suffering. Yes, that really stinks. Like, that really stinks. Really stinks. I think back. I had a great-grandmother who passed away when I was in seminary. She was basically my grandmother. She lived with us for 5 or 6 years. It was terrible at the time. I was in high school, and I had a great-grandmother who lived in our house and would, like, walk around in a nightgown at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, hey, Dad, can you get your grandma and put her back in her room, please? Like in the moment, anybody else live with your grandma for, like where they moved in? I loved her to death, but it was like, oh, my goodness, this is terrible. But she passed away, and I just remember being there in the moment and just, like, weeping because I had literally no control over it. You and I don't have control over somebody else's body. My grandmother on my mom's side passed away almost a year later. I was here at Field Street. It was actually my first Easter here. I missed Easter Sunday, I think, or I left Easter Sunday to go and feed my grandmother actually let her drink orange juice. I remember that's the last thing I did with my grandmother. I stood in the hospital and watched her suffer as she struggled to drink water and apple juice as I was serving her, a woman who had literally given her life. Multiple cousins of mine lived with her because they were cast out of their home for different periods of their life. And this is a woman who then we were serving as she was helpless. And there's nothing I could do about it. I mean, just give her a kiss on the forehead and tell her I love her and feed her water, or give her water, or give her orange juice, right? Or apple juice. That's really, 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 really frustrating to watch someone die like that right in front of you. What are some other thoughts on pain and suffering, or frustrations, or I don't know, just realities? Spontaneous. Be very spontaneous. You realize, and I don't want to scare you. This probably will scare you, but I mean, let's be honest. There's no way you can change this. But when you get into a car and you're driving on a highway, you know how, like if you're a driver now, or if you've been in a car, do you know how far away on a 2-lane highway, like in between here and Godly, do you know how far away you are from the car in the other lane? A lot closer than you really want to be, if you think about it. Just think, I mean, speeding bullet, feet away from each other. That's why people drift for a second and it's gone, right? It's just, I mean, it's spontaneous. It just takes a drift at the wrong second in the wrong direction, because you are in a vehicle that gets you from point A to point B quickly, and you're both going 60 miles an hour, and when fast things collide, bad things happen, or big things happen. That's physics 101. Y'all can tell me what that is later. I don't know what that is. So here are some thoughts that I not just kind of rapid fire. Again, the case for faith. There's a bookstore called Mardel. I got this book for $5 at Mardel in Fort Worth. Talk about that. They have like all these cheap books. And I went in looking for this. I was like, dude, $5? No way. I was planning to pay like $15. Here's some things that I ran into along the way. You ready for this? Can I blow your mind some more? There's just things I learned about evil and suffering for the next 5 minutes. I'm going to rapid fire through them. There's 5 things. First, evil as evidence for God. You ready for this? So have you heard the argument, well, evil exists, so therefore God is either not good or not existent. Have you heard that before? Here's the reasoning this guy gave for that. He said, this is that smart guy, I forgot his name, Kreeft or something like that, Dr. Kreeft. Using the standard of good to judge evil presupposes, so a presupposition just means something that you come in kind of knowing or understanding. So to say that something is evil because it's not good means that you come in with the assumption that there is a standard for what good is. So in order to say something's evil, you must have a standard for what? That makes sense? I'm going to say that again. So in order to say something's bad and evil, you must know what good is. So using a standard of good to judge evil presupposes that there's a set standard for what good is, a set truth or a measurement or a person who determines good and evil. So if you're thinking about that question and you're like, man, the very fact that evilness exists is an argument against God, well then what determines if something's evil or not evil? You have to answer that question before you can dive into that. That's evil as evidence for God. Another thing I ran into, I'm going to scatter shoot. These are all kind of on topic. Ready for this? One purpose of suffering in the world is that it has led to repentance. It's led to laying down your life and saying, you know what, this suffering is terrible, but I'm going to trust Jesus through it. This is something C.S. Lewis said, who also, ironically enough, like Lee Strobel, C.S. Lewis was a Brit. He lived in England. He wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series. Best friends with J.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings. Yeah, you didn't know that. That's cool, isn't it? Like two guys writing novels and thinking about Middle-eastern. Anyways, okay. C.S. Lewis, he also wrote a lot of nonfiction stuff. He said this, God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. Pain is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. So in other words, C.S. Lewis is saying that pain is what God uses to get your attention oftentimes. Simply put, this is what that smart guy said. He said this. You ready? Simply put, I believe that suffering is compatible with God's love if it is medicinal, remedial, and necessary. That is, if we're very sick and desperately need a cure, and that's our situation, Jesus said it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Which, just to kind of sum it up, are you ready? Many Christians try to get God off the hook for suffering, right? So a friend comes to you and says, hey, there's suffering in the world, so God can't exist. And you're like, no, God didn't mean for there to be suffering, or like you try to get God off the hook. But think about this. God himself put himself on the hook with the cross. Therefore, the practical conclusion is that if we want to be with God, we have to be with suffering. We can't avoid the cross, either in thought or in fact. We must go to where he is, and the cross is one of the places where he is. And when he sends us to the sunrises, we think of the sunrises. When he sends us to the sunsets and deaths and suffering and crosses, we thank him for that too. Ultimately, it's a question of sovereignty, which is why I put that before you. My encouragement to you is that you take that, particularly that one, home and just read through and think about those verses on sovereignty. The question is God in control? And if you believe God's in control, are you okay with that? Control freaks in the room. I'm one of them, right? I want everything to be under control. God is in control. If you agree, then are you okay with that? And if you're okay with that, then regardless of whether I can wrap my brain around suffering or not, I've got to trust that he knows more than I do. And the irony of it is this, that it's the spectators, the people who are on the outside looking at suffering, from who skeptics rise. But those who are actually in the arena of suffering from the inside, those are the people from which we see some of the most profound examples of unconquerable faith. I've read and heard stories of martyrs, people who were literally being carried off and burned alive at the stake, who are singing Amazing Grace along the way. There's stories of martyrs who are going to death for Jesus Christ, which, first of all, why would you do that unless he believed that he was who he was? Okay, second thing, they're going to the cross, or to their death, and they're singing these songs, and they'll look up and make eye contact with their wife, and their wives will stand up and sing the song. Like, hairs, back of my neck, straight up. Think about that. In the midst of suffering, will you have unconquerable faith or will you not? Okay, so this, literally, I just opened up a big old fat can of worms, and I can tell I did, which was my goal. Don Broyles, will you wave at me for a second? He has right there underneath that pin, right in front of him on that stool. There's actually some follow-up questions that I ripped straight from this book. And I'll give you a warning. I emailed these to your parents too. So if your parents start asking you questions about suffering, you're welcome. If they don't, maybe you could ask them. But here's my encouragement to you. Take those forms, the papers, half sheets home if you really want to dig further. And even if you don't, man, this is shaped, like this has rocked my world this week, reading through this book. Again, A Case for Faith. If you're a reader, such a good book. It's hard, though. I mean, it blew my mind, and I've done a lot of reading and a lot of deep reading before. So don't go into it thinking it's going to be like a TV dinner. It's meat and potatoes. But also, on your way out, if you're so bold, grab one of those sheets. There's some questions about pain and suffering. There's even like an exercise of, hey, if you could change one thing about the world, if God lets you have the power to do that, what would it be? And then think through the consequences for that. So there's some exercises that you can go through with your friends, with your parents, with anyone you want to. But I encourage you to do that. Hey, can I